Welcome to Hague Talks, the podcast, where we hear directly from some of the Hague Talks community about how they're setting peace and justice in motion.
My name is Vishal Prasad. I'm currently the campaign director of the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change. That is a youth-led organization that is working to campaign on an advisory opinion on climate change and human rights from the International Court of Justice.
Vishal is from Fiji, and he's one of the students who've shaken up the world of climate justice. Via his work, his pressure, together with his fellow students, the United Nations General Assembly, all the states of the world, have asked the International Court of Justice here in The Hague to say what states have to do about climate change. I'm Janet Anderson, and I caught up with Vishal in between lobbying and public appearances during Hague Justice Week in June 2023 to ask him a few crucial questions. Favourite colour?
Favorite color would be blue.
Favourite food?
Chicken biryani.
Favourite day?
Partial to Wednesday because that's when I was born and also in the middle of the week, so I'm going to say Wednesday.
And I was interviewing you here in June, and I understand that it's your birthday during this week, which happens to be on World Environment Day. That's a bit extraordinary, isn't it?
I know. What could be the odds of having that?
So that's not your favourite day, World Environment Day?
It is. Oh, it always is because it falls on my birthday. But on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, I love Wednesdays, I think.
Vishal's story is all about how he and his fellow law students managed to inspire a Pacific state to take their suggestion that the World Court, the ICJ, could potentially be the place to tackle climate change. But before getting to that, I wanted to know a bit more about Vishal and his identity. So let's kind of wind right back to your beginnings, Vishal. So you're from Fiji, grew up at town, village?
I'd say grew up in the town, or the more urban part of the country.
What does it mean to be Fijian?
Oh, it's a lot of things, really. Of course, first and foremost, you're Fijian, but Fiji is a multicultural country, and so you have this dynamic where you are what we call Indo-Fijian or Fijians of Indian descent. That would describe it, and then we're part of a group of other a more multicultural grouping of people, and so you always find yourself. It's a lot of things Fiji, and because of this multiculturalism, it has this character, this dynamic character that has been brought by the different groups in the country.
How does that get represented? I mean, is there something that you can point to? Is it like dance or song?
It's actually all of those things. You see that in dance, you see those in food, in the arts that we learn, the school curriculum that you study, the movies that are shown in the cinemas, and even national programs, official languages of the country. It's representative of that dynamic, of the diversity.
And what does it mean to come from the Pacific?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is you come from a very communal environment, a very laid-back environment. That you say, we call ourselves always operating on island time. And that means we always are late or work according to our time or when the time suits us. But yeah, it's a lot of things actually. The biggest thing is the idea of this community, this familiarity within people, these relationships, because in the Pacific, you are so close together. Everyone knows each other. And so everyone's related in one way or the other. And you have this bond with everyone. And so you're walking down the street, you might know about 10, 15 people already on the street, and you might know your colleagues and friends and families. So everyone knows everyone else. And even if you're not closely related, you can expect that if you do go speak to someone, they're going to be equally friendly as your family member or something like that. So it's this idea that's, I'd say Pacific.
When was the first time that you became conscious as somebody from the Pacific of climate change? Do you use the term climate change?
I go with the context, actually, but in the Pacific, there are several terms. Of course, climate crisis is what's more common. There's also climate emergency. But so we'll go with climate crisis for this purposes. My first introduction of this, at that time, it was termed climate change. I was in year 4. Let's see, about 10 or 11. That was my first time. It was my class teacher. I remember when he got up in the classroom and drew on the blackboard to explain to us the concept of greenhouse effect and what is greenhouse effect and how it is affecting the planet. And that was at that time an idea that was completely new to me, because I was first, as a young person, introduced to this idea of a huge threat that's out there to our planet. And then after that, you don't get a sense of, okay, we got this huge problem, but my teacher never explained to us what we're doing about it. And so it was just an exercise to explain that we have this huge problem on our hands. I think that was one of the moments, or the moment probably, that started me on this journey to climate activism. Because as I said, at that point, no one told us there's a solution, or this is what needs to be done. And fast forward, I was in year 4, and now I am here in 2023. And I still think that we're in the same position. We have this big problem. We sort of know what the solution is, but we're not getting there somehow. And that is now the problem. And so when I look back to what year 4 was, I say in many ways we might be in the same place, the same situation. And I think that has been something that has been with me through high school, university even. We study at the University of the South Pacific, and this is a very prominent discussion, climate change and the issues of the Pacific and what we've been fighting for, the challenges we've been facing for generations. In many cases remain the same right now. And so there needs to be solutions. There needs to be Pacific focused solutions that are out of the box, that are innovative, that can help really address the challenges, these generational challenges that the Pacific is facing.
Quite often, students sit around and discuss theoretically, some kind of big issue that they think and come up with a theoretical solution to it and kind of pat themselves on the back. Haven't we sort of been intellectually amazing? But in your case, it's actually turned into something real. I mean, you've actually got a state getting the United Nations General Assembly to ask the International Court of Justice to do something. It's just an extraordinary feeling, I would imagine, as a student.
Exactly. You're absolutely correct. I think part of the reason we go to universities and you get this enlightening, you get this awakening, okay, this is a problem, this needs to be done. And many times we just leave it at that. Okay, we've got this understanding, okay, but we can't do much. We're not in power, we don't have resources, and so many excuses and so many things we can say. And so this campaign was quite unique. There was when the first group of 27 students, they were approached with this idea, and they really thought about this, that, okay, international law can be used. We have some power. We could do something about it. And the idea of an advisory opinion from the ICJ did come across, and we're like, okay, we can do something about it. It's a huge ask. It's very ambitious. It might not succeed. There's so many risks out there. We need half of the world to support this. Who's going to come on board? At least we need a country. And so many initial discussions. We don't have resources. We don't have expertise. We're just students at the moment. Because it's a huge campaign. If you see, it requires diplomatic maneuverings, it requires legal expertise, and then you need CSO and grassroots level mobilization. And all of those three need to work hand in hand in order to achieve the result that we have. And so at that point, back in 2019, it was an idea that was very ambitious, very crazy, but we decided to press on, I think, and driven from that passion, driven from that motivation that, okay, we want to make a difference. We want to leave a better Pacific. And so I think that has what's led us to where we are in this campaign.
There's some kind of dramatic consequences possible for some places with climate change. And we've seen places already go through some horrific things like huge hurricanes and typhoons. I mean, huge devastation has already happened in Pacific Islands. What are the potential consequences for Fiji, for you?
Well, we know generally what the reports have predicted. A world that exceeds warming beyond 1.5 is going to be catastrophic for all of us. In Fiji, it's a reality that we often don't talk about because it's so worrying and so bleak and disappointing. But you have to have those conversations. I visited one of the first villages that was relocated in the Pacific, in Fiji. this was with the help of the government that this community was relocated. And the government has identified 42 to 43 more villages or communities that need to be moved in the immediate future because of the impacts of climate change. And
so these are the kind of villages which are in low-lying areas,
yes,
maybe on the shore.
most,
and then what do they leave behind when they have to move?
Well, from the one village that I visited, which is an extremely heartbreaking experience to go see what they have, I talked about this communal living idea the Pacific is known for. And when you go to a village, you have the idea of what a village is that you have people that are so close together. Everyone's living close by, you share everything, you have one source of livelihood, the sea mostly, and everyone is responsible for everyone else. And there's this great bond of kinship, of love, and the environment when you go to a village is just so heartwarming. But when I went to this village that had been relocated, what's left behind are deserted homes that have trees and overgrown grass and all of these things, battered down houses, those that have been, because the sea is coming up so fast. Some of them had to remove their houses altogether, so you'd see foundation or the piles and posts of the house and some of the piles of cement left behind. And then you hear these stories about what used to be here. And the village headman to that one village I went to, he spoke about, he was telling us, this is where I grew up, this is the house my mother gave birth to, and this is where I was born. And when you look and turn around, you don't see a house, you just see remains of what used to be a house, and it's now overgrown. And it's just so saddening because, and then he tells us, I learned the ways of the sea here. I learned how to fish, how to keep my family going, how to swim, how to survive, because we are fisher folk here. But now they have moved away from the sea. And he goes on to say that I would have wanted the same future for my children and for my grandchildren, to be able to grow in the same environment, the same skills, the same atmosphere that I had. But unfortunately, because they have been forced to leave, that's no longer possible. And so, and perhaps one of the most saddening things in that experience brought to me was the idea of ancient burial grounds. That in the village, when a person dies, you also bury them in the village because they're still a part of the village. And so many of these, the burial grounds of people, the graves of people, they also have been inundated by seawater or the rising of sea level. And that is, again, another very sad reality, because in the Pacific, that is also something we hold dear, our ancestors and our link to them. And so that's why they're always part of that village. But you can't relocate them, of course. And so that is a huge, huge loss. And when you see that reality, when you see those burial grounds, you can't do anything about them, but just move on and leave them behind. It's just a very, very sad reality to face with.
So I wondered whether Vishal had ever really imagined that he would actually be here in Europe, in The Hague, thinking about how climate justice would be debated in the courts. When you look back and think about when you were trying to put this idea together, did you kind of imagine yourself in the Great Hall of Justice and doing it? Was that part of the thought process, or were you really more concentrating on the idea?
To be honest, no, I did not think this far because at that point, when you're trying to get a campaign off the ground, of course, you have this vision of the long term, but it becomes also a daily basis of fighting the smaller battles that lead to eventually winning the war. And so you have milestones throughout the journey that we've been focused on, getting one country to support this. Okay, check. Then you get the Pacific behind us. Okay, check. And ultimately, these led to us coming to the Great Halls of Justice. And so if you'd asked me back in 2020 when I joined the campaign, if I had envisioned myself in the Hague on a day in June and talking about how far the campaign has gone, I would say no, I have not. But here we are, and here's where the campaign's brought us.
Thanks, Vishal Prasad, for sharing with us his work on climate justice, on what it means to be somebody from the Pacific facing the climate threat, and on getting states to actually do something about it here in The Hague. Check out all the podcasts for Hague Talks. This verse collection is around Hague Justice Week, with some of the great people setting peace and justice in motion. And don't forget to like and share Hague Talks, the podcast.